Welcome everybody to the Daily Huddle Spiritual Matters Thursdays. I am your host, Dr. Monikah Ogando. I am very excited that we are here today because the topic for today is, do you get punished for your bad behavior? And I gotta tell you, it's one of those questions that your reaction tells me where you stand on the karmic cycle. I just gotta tell you. Some people are listening to that question, they're like, ooh, let me see what I can get away with. And other people are like, ooh, let me see what I have to confess. So we're gonna get into what that conversation is about. And I have a perfect quote for that topic. It comes from Sadhguru. Some of you know who Sadhguru is. He's an Indian guru or teacher. That's what guru means, by the way. It's not someone who's above you. A guru is a teacher. And he has a quote that says, karma is not in your action, it is in your volition. It is not the content of your life, but the context that creates karma. Ooh, there's so many words to define, to get clear on, to make sure that we're not making assumptions. Lord, it's going to be a juicy one. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Daily Huddle. Welcome everybody to the Daily Huddle Spiritual Matters Thursday. And like I said, I'm your host, Dr. Monikah Ogando. I'm talking fast and you need to listen fast because we have a lot to cover today. So let's get grounded in today's moment. I'm going to ask my lovely Tara friend, how are you today and who are you going to hug?
Well, can you hear me? Because I'm testing my AirPods.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Yay! So I'll tell you how I am today. Is that what you asked me?
Yes. And who are you going to hug today?
Yes. Okay. So I am the way I say I am. And this morning I listened to yesterday's Daily Huddle right before I came on here. So I am all lit up. That's how I am today. That's and nice. I am going to hug my sweet Caroline, my daughter.
Oh, sweet Caroline. You know you're saying it. You know you're singing it.
Felt so good.
Okay.
That was random.
Keeping the love train going. Andrea, where are you and what are you grateful for?
I am where I need to be, which is right here. And I'm grateful for people like women, strong leaders that are powerful. I'm grateful for women. This is the month of awareness of others that are not as lucky as we are. So let's keep the momentum because that's what I'm grateful for. Yes. For strong women. Yep.
I love it. I love it. Little known history fact, everybody. You know that March 8th yesterday was the International Women's Day. But November 25th is the International Day stands against violence against women. It's like awareness about violence against women. And it came from Las Hermanas Mirabal, the Mirabal sisters, who were three amazing, powerful activists in the Dominican Republic who stood up against the dictator Trujillo and were murdered for it. And so the conversation around violence on women stems a lot from our activism and our social justice work. And I just wanted to presence that in honor of International Women's Day and the Dominican Connection, of course. So I want to get into our topic for today. Do you get punished for your bad behavior? And in true check yourself before you wreck yourself fashion, we're going to audit our assumptions and we're going to define the words that we're using so that we're operating from the same sheet of music. First, let's define punishment. Do you get punished for bad behavior? And punishment usually means some price you're paying to make up for or to address whatever offense, whatever harm, whatever damage you have caused with your actions, your words, and the consequences thereof. That's typically what punishment means. However, it also carries with it a judgment of that you've done something that merits your suffering, right? That because you've caused suffering, you get to have suffering now. And it's a meted out type of thing. This is why sometimes you will hear phrases like, the punishment doesn't match the crime. In other words, you're suffering more than what you've caused, therefore the punishment is way more exaggerated than what the crime merits, right? So there's a certain level of suffering or a judgment imputed that is carried with the denotation or the connotation of punishment. I'm going to shift that a little bit for the purposes of our conversation and say, and Gio brought this up a little bit earlier before we started broadcasting, that there's such a thing as karma, which is what the quote was talking about. Sadhguru was talking about the context of your life is what brings about karma, not the content of your life. And here's what I mean by that. Here's what I interpret from that quote. You know how there are some folks who do a particular thing, an action. Let's say, for example, a 5-year-old little boy who smacks his brother upside the head, right? And he's just annoyed, they're just playing, et cetera, et cetera. That action, when done by, let's say, an adult person in full throes of anger and wanting to hurt somebody else, et cetera, and they smack the crap out of you, that same action over here is just like a kid being a kid, or they're just being playful, et cetera. Over here, it could be a felony assault, right? Same action, different context, because this person perhaps doesn't have better tools to manage their emotional output, or perhaps they're just playing and just kind of got too rough. This person, we assume in this example that they know what they're doing and they want it to cause harm. And so when there's that intention, when there's that context of willingly inflicting harm, then that's when the karma comes around in a different way. And so what we want to talk about today is, do you get punished, or are you just held accountable for your behavior? And sometimes we get away with some things because we think that we live in a parallel universe, that there's a public sphere and a private sphere, that there are public words and deeds and there are private thoughts and intentions. And where we sometimes get mixed up is that there's a veil thins, and sometimes your private thoughts and intentions leak through your words and actions. Does it make sense what I'm saying? So that, for example, you may mean well when you say something that offends someone, for example. And there may be a conflict in the conversation, there may be an awkward moment or a sense of disconnect, et cetera. But you've heard the phrase, no harm, no foul. Whereas there are some people who may say some of the most beautiful things, and they may use some of the most beautiful words, but you can feel the poison coming through some of the stuff that they say. And so even though on the public sphere, it looks like these are pretty words, the private thought, the private intention leaks through anyway. And my position, my opinion, is that you do not get punished for your behavior so much as held accountable to it energetically. Some people may never find out what you quote unquote did, what harm you did, et cetera. But you know, especially if you meant it as harm, and eventually that comes back. Where it gets a little dicey is where people feel harmed and they feel like they've not put anything out. It's like, why am I getting all this suffering? I didn't do anything. So there's like this math that sometimes we have in our head that it's like, if I put out good, I'm gonna get good. And if I get bad, I must have done something bad and I didn't do anything bad. So the math is not mathing. right? And we feel like we have to call God's manager, like he's not doing his job. We need to talk to the supervisor because this is not the equation, right? If I put out good, good's supposed to come back to me. Why is bad coming back to me? So let's talk about that because we're talking about context here, right? Now, have you ever been in an experience? Have you ever walked into a room where two people are having a conversation and you missed part of that conversation? But you know they were some kind of like argument or tiff or like the energy's off. Like you walked in there and you don't have the whole story, but you know something's up. Has that ever happened to you? Put a 1 in the chat or raise your hand if you're in video so that I can see it. There have been some times when you are like, something happened. I don't know what happened. I'm missing part of the story, but something happened and I'm not privy to it, right? It's the same thing with karma. Now, there are some assumptions that you're going to have to at least consider. If you are of the assumption that you are born once, you live once, you die once, and that's it for you, just this incarnation, some stuff is not going to make sense to you. That's like literally missing part of the context of your consciousness. Because then, if something happens to you that you didn't deserve, then the math doesn't make sense to you. Then it's like, well, where did this come from? I did nothing to deserve this. Why am I befallen with such bad luck or bad karma, et cetera, et cetera? It doesn't make sense. It's confusing. You doubt your faith. You doubt the order of the universe, et cetera, et cetera. But if you allow yourself to consider that this is not your only incarnation, that your consciousness has traveled several incarnations, and that you have, if you're a woman now, for example, there's another incarnation where you've been a man, or if you're a man now, there's another incarnation where you've been a woman, or that if you are Black in this incarnation, there's another incarnation where you've been white, and vice versa. If you're white now, there was another incarnation where you've been Black. And so there may be some things that happen in this incarnation, you're like, this has nothing to do with this lifetime. Because there's no data on this lifetime that merits that level of come back, right? That circle up. I'll give you an example. In this incarnation, in this lifetime, I have not experienced racial violence. Me, myself, and my body. I have not experienced racial violence. I've been called a couple of names, but I've never put any weight on it the way that some people put in certain words. To me, it's an opportunity to be a smartass, if you ask me. I'm like, oh, you want to play with words? That's my game. So it doesn't match that I feel such extreme, judgmental, almost violent vitriol towards people that inflict racial violence on other people, because it's like, that hasn't touched you, Monica. Why do you feel so strongly about it? The emotional reaction that I have doesn't match my experience. And some of you may feel that way about some things. Maybe you feel that way about pedophilia. Maybe you feel that way about underdogs. Maybe you feel that way about poverty. Maybe you feel that way about, just like we were talking about earlier with International Women's Day, or violence against women, for example. Maybe something hasn't touched you directly, but you feel such strong emotional reaction to it, like as if it did happen to you. And I'm going to assert that the reason for the emotional reaction today is because in another incarnation, you had an embodied experience of that sentiment, right? So it's kind of like a bleed through. I want you to consider that when you think about some of the stuff in your life that has happened, that has harmed you, that has caused suffering, that has caused unfairness, that you don't have answers to, that you can't explain based on your present incarnation or somebody else's incarnation. My brother-in-law, for example, he was a healthy, athletic, beautiful human being, thoughtful, just all about family, etc. In that math, he didn't deserve to get ALS, much less to die from it. But when I think about ALS, is really just the shutting down of all of your systems, until someone has to do absolutely everything for you. And you literally do not have the capacity to even breathe. Your muscles are not strong enough to even breathe. And eventually that's what ALS patients die from. It makes me think, where in another life was he so self-sufficient that he didn't allow other people to help him? Or that in another life, he was called to help other people and didn't, such that now he had to receive help automatically, no matter how much it hurt his pride, no matter how much it hurt his idea of self-sufficiency, no matter how much he didn't want to, he had to accept help. So I want you to think about some of the things that you haven't grappled with yet. Not only the things that you, maybe you've inflicted harm or you've inflicted suffering, but some of the suffering that hasn't been inflicted, some of the harm that has been inflicted on you. And just be with the question, is this a come around from this time? Or could this be a come around from another time? And if so, what's the come around for? I believe that some of these questions help us to make better sense of our own existence, of the way we move in the world. And it helps to create at least some semblance of order in how the world works. Because we have a tremendous amount of resistance to a world that we don't understand. As human beings, like, I'm missing something. Something's not making sense. The math ain't mathing. I'm missing something. But if we can understand it, even if it's something that you invent, you know, somebody might say in a particular faith, they might say, there's no such thing as reincarnation. So you're just making that up to make yourself feel better. That may be true. But the argument could also be made that you create some heaven out there somewhere in the future, and you make that up to make yourself feel better, right? And so I just want you to consider, what have I done, or what has been done to me that feels like punishment? Or what kind of suffering has someone endured that I've witnessed that feels like punishment? And what could possibly be the come around or the lesson in that? Take all the suffering, all the resistance, all the pain, all the sadness, all the anger, all the indignation about how could this happen and they didn't deserve it, and take all of that emotional stuff, put it somewhere where you can pick it up again, and just sit with the question, how could this be useful? And what is the lesson here? Because you can put all that stuff back up again. You can put your sadness and your anger and your indignation back on again. But sometimes you can't really see the lesson while you're carrying the sadness and the anger and the indignation. So let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Does something come up for you? I'm looking at Tara and I'm like, oh, this might be a coffee date, Tara. Oh my goodness.
Well, I'll tell you what's coming up, and I already know how many lessons there are, but it's kind of heavy. So I'll share it anyway. Many of you know that my son spent over 7 years in prison because he was driving drunk and hit somebody who he harmed, and she's very disabled now due to this accident. And right before he got out of prison, he met with the family of the victim. And they are a Christian family. And the father said to my son, how can you live with yourself? How can you get up and look in the mirror ever again? I just don't understand how you can walk this earth. And as much as he suffered, quite honestly, I don't have an answer to that. He does, but I would like to know your take on that. Does people believe that he should feel punished for the rest of his life?
You want my answer?
I absolutely do.
Well, I think it goes back to the quote from earlier from Sadhguru, that it's not just the actions. Karma isn't just about the actions, it's about the volition. And so when someone means harm to someone else, I think that does come back to them. I think that does. There are some things that we do that maybe in the world can seem illegal, or perhaps they do cause harm, but somebody doesn't think that it causes harm. There are some people walking around the earth that you might argue, political figures even, they're like, how do they get away with laundering money, tax evasion, and all this illegal activity, and they're just walking around like, like nothing ever happened. Meantime, you're over here selling Lucy cigarettes and you get murdered. How is this even possible in the same world? And so it's the volition aspect of it. And we cannot be blind to the fact that that all exists inside of a vacuum. There are certain privileges that some people get that some others don't, right? And so your son, for example, is he out now? He's out now.
Yes.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
he's out now. There are some people that will spend the rest of their lives in prison for lesser things, with less intention to do harm. And so we kind of have to like swim in these muddy waters of, we take responsibility and accountability for our actions, and then be with people when they're not done processing their grief and their harm and their reaction to our actions. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Somebody's reaction to my action isn't my responsibility. I can only take accountability for my action.
Right. And how we respond to our actions and our choices.
Right.
We can only control what we do today and going forward, right?
That's exactly right. And sometimes people want you to. It's like, I want you to feel bad for as long as I feel offended. Like we're just on this parallel track. When I'm done feeling offended, then you can stop feeling guilty. It doesn't work like that. You get to decide how you process things.
Yeah, pretty powerful. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Who else has something that they want to share? Hey, Robin, I see you over there. Welcome. Who else has something? Come on, work it out. Gio, you have something? You unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I'll play with you.
Okay.
The question initially, I wasn't visiting it in the depthness in which you unfolded the conversation, right? But now that you have, guided us into a kind of a quite depthness for the opportunity of suffering and punishment and karma, I can't help but to share more of my personal beliefs and personal philosophies, but they're not associated with the truth, right? I am of the belief that life is meaningless. It's empty and is meaningless, and it's empty that is meaningless. There's no meaning to life necessarily, other than the one that human beings put on, or I put on. But the only world that I have access to is my subjective look at life. My experience of life is the only access I have for the opportunity of life. But absent of me being in the world, it's meaningless, if you will, for me. So I am someone who prays or meditates, right? And I am not oblivious of how brutal life is to some people. I'm not oblivious to that. And I pray, I meditate for the eternal gratitude I have, because I have way more than I deserve. And whatever I call at the beginning, whatever I was jumping around for, yep, I do get punished for what I do. It is like the small little things, like there was a time when I cheated on someone. And when I cheated on her, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm such an idiot. Why did I do that? This is going to come back to me because I'm a fool. I'm an idiot. This is wrong. I'm bad. And about 10 years later, I got cheated on. It was terrible, but I couldn't be mad, like terribly mad. Like I was like, he was.
You recognized it, like the come around?
So what?
You recognized it like a come around?
Yeah, a little bit. Like it was my friend, and they were like, they both had one of those cool nights, and they both came to me to apologize. It's like, you guys are idiots. Don't tell me this. Can you just hide that shit? But 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 I was like, I can't be mad, man. And I remembered. So that's kind of what not long ago I was pointing to. Not long ago, I dropped off a plane and I broke my legs and I lost everything. And I lost everything I built and everything.
Mhm.
And was there something I did to cause that? No. But there was this beautiful place to come from while that was happening. What is this useful for? Why is this for me? How is this happening for me? How can I build my life on this suffering, if you will? And it gave me the rest of my life. And it's just beautiful what has come around from that. So that's kind of like the soup in which I actually see the conversation that you were creating today.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. And what an amazing way of, you articulated it beautifully, that sometimes we don't see the meaning of something or the purpose or usefulness of something in the moment that it's happening. You laying there with a broken leg, it's like, what is this even for? But fast forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, the usefulness of your life or the perspective that you now have or your dedication to purpose or to impact or transformation would not have been possible to the unbroken leg Gio. He needed to go through that. That's right. Yeah. Good stuff. Sorrel, you have something?
Yes, Dr. Monikah, I have a question. Yesterday, during your conversation with Andrea, you mentioned your favorite quote from Albert Einstein. Do I live in a friendly universe or an unfriendly universe?
Right.
That perception or that place to come from gives me the life I live. And I'm listening to this conversation today, and it's striking me as if you're saying that maybe the universe is neither friendly nor unfriendly, but should you commit an unfriendly act in this lifetime, it comes back to you unfriendly. And should you commit friendly acts in this lifetime, it comes back to you friendly. I'm grappling with that. What's the relationship between a friendly and an unfriendly universe and the kind of karma you're talking about?
Well, in my estimation, an unfriendly universe doesn't have grace in it. And an unfriendly universe is looking for ways to stick it to you and makes room for, when there's harm to be repaid, it's harm plus late fees and stupid tax and like all this other harm attached to it. It's just unfriendly. And so there's no space for grace. There's no space for forgiveness in an unfriendly universe. It's just more, vengeance and payback on top of that. And so when I decide, to your point, it is neither friendly nor unfriendly, but my decision makes it so. When I decide that I live in a friendly universe, I make room for grace. I make room for mercy. I make room for reconciliation. I make room for forgiveness. And then I make room also for a generous assumption of positive intent. There are some things that people do that do cause harm or create harm, but they didn't intend that. Maybe it was out of ignorance. Maybe it was out of neglect. Maybe it was out of thoughtlessness. Gio, when he had that accident, he wasn't like, what I'm going to do today? I'm going to be thoughtless and I'm going to create an accident for myself so that I can learn how to touch people and impact the world. He didn't set out to do that, right? That came from thinking through, that came from processing, that came from being with his own pain. And I just think that in a friendly universe, pain can be healing and it can be a vehicle to greater connection, greater impact, and greater transformation among loved ones and strangers. That's what I say.
Thank you, Dr. Monikah. I have a quick follow-on question.
Yes.
So, as a recovering Catholic,
Okay.
I'm in love with guilt and shame.
Yes.
And I'm discovering in this conversation that maybe all punishment may be self-inflicted. So the question I have is there such a thing as punishment, really?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I do not believe in punishment. I believe in consequences. That's different. And I think that actions beget a reaction or a consequence, etc., because of the intent of the action, not the action itself. So to your point, Gio, we're going to use your cheating scandal over there. Lord have mercy, scandalous man. There are times I have witnessed friends of mine who have actually stepped out of their marriages or of their relationships and have engaged in relationships with other people unbeknownst to their partner. And if their partner knew, they would have a problem with it. And they hide it from them because they want to get a need met, but they don't want to hurt the person, which is where the hiding comes from, and the lying and the deception, etc. If this person knew, it would hurt their feelings. And they sometimes take that quote unquote relationship to the grave. Nobody ever knows about that. Well, I know about that stuff, but their partner didn't know about that stuff, right? So it was like they would just go on and live their happy lives and they would be none the wiser for it. And it was a moment, it was a phase, and they grew out of it, or they, made different decisions or whatever. And it's like, I'm not doing that again. I don't like carrying the weight of knowing this or hiding this or blah, blah, blah. So I'm not telling, I'm not confessing, but I'm also not doing it again, right? And this person went on to live a happy life. Now, does this person deserve punishment for this? I don't think so. I think they had to go through a particular experience. And sometimes the ways that we make agreements in our relationships do not allow for somebody else's full self-expression because we're too invested in protecting our preferences. And so when you can allow someone to be fully self-expressed without it meaning anything about you and your insufficiency or your specialness or whatever, then there's no need to hide. And there's no need for punishment. And if you think about it, I just want you to take 10 minutes of your life and just think about the ways in which we punish people. It's typically because a privilege, a preference, or a sense of specialness has been compromised. And we want to inflict pain to justify and to put that specialness and preference and position back in place. But if you weren't invested in your own specialness, why would you need to punish anybody for? That was a rhetorical question. I just want you to journal on that.
Thank you, Doc.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us. We're a little bit, we're 4 minutes past our time. So thank you for staying engaged in this really juicy conversation. I really wish, you know what? I'm gonna plan it out so that we have a little bit more time than 30 minutes. Stay tuned. We have some in-person, real life events happening. I'm not at a liberty to say, yeah, but I just want you to know, this 30 minutes is really supposed to be just a taster. It's supposed to be a pink spoon sample of what's available for the Daily Huddle family. So thank you so much for staying engaged with us. As always, love generously, give abundantly, laugh obnoxiously. I want you to caw. I want you to guffaw. I want you to make it contagious, your laughter. Sleep at least 7 hours a day. Eat more plant-based, stress less, move your tail feather. And as always, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Audit your assumptions. Thank you, everybody, for being here. See you next time.
Thank you. Excellent job. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you, Doc.
I saw your comment about the water fast, Tara. That was hilarious.